Hi, Squad members. Welcome to another special Pop Culture SquadCast. I'm Bob Harrison, and we'll be playing for you the recording of the discussion panel that we had at Baltimore Comic-Con on October 19th, 2019. The panel was titled Revisiting Mutant X. We talked with a couple of creators from the hit Marvel comic series from the turn of the 21st century. The panelists were writer and creator Howard Mackie and inker extraordinaire Andrew Pepoy. We had a great time reminiscing and reminding Howard about this little X-book that could. We hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as we did, and now let's get started. Let's get started here. I'm Bob Harrison. I work for Pop Culture Squad, which is a pop culture-friendly website for all types of fandoms. We have on our panel Howard Mackie, writer of Mutant X, Andrew Pepoy, who inked incredibly almost all of, if not every single panel of Mutant X.
Not all of it, at least something.
Like 90%. And so if you're not familiar with Mutant X, welcome. And it was a comic that came out from Marvel in 1998, I believe. And
I was 16 years old.
It's
shocking.
But to just kind of level set, Mutant X is an alternate reality in the Marvel Universe where Havoc, Alex Summers, had been transported into a place fully grown and didn't know where he was because the entire reality was different than what he had experienced his whole life. Really was pretty groundbreaking at the time because it was really the first thing that Marvel had done that was an alternate reality in the present tense. Everything else kind of before that had been future, like Days of Future Past and what ifs. And it was really the first what if that was a actual series as opposed to like a one shot or two or a couple issues. So that's what was really interesting about it, and we're going to talk about it. So Howard, why don't you introduce yourself just a little bit?
Right. I'm Howard Mackie. I
Nice
wrote
Howard.
the nice Howard, the nicest Howard actually. I wrote Mutant X. I started out at Marvel Comics in the 80s. 1984 as an assistant editor, was an editor on staff for exactly 7 years to the day, and was a freelance and contract writer for Marvel, mostly, aside from Mutant X, Spider-Man, the Clone Saga, and Ghost Rider, and then pretty much had my hands on every single character in the Marvel Universe on some level, and left my fingerprints on many of them. And that's who I am.
Yay.
Thank you. So I do have the Spider-Man here, but I did leave out. I was not going to bring up the Clone Saga.
Oh, I embrace the Clone Saga at this point. If you hated it, hopefully you're not in this room. and if you liked it, thank you.
And just to follow up on that, the Ghost Rider, he created Danny Ketch. So if you want to ask about that, we probably can talk about that later too. Andrew Pepoy, inker.
Yeah, so while he left his fingerprints on things, I left like really visible inky fingerprints. So as I mentioned earlier, I inked at least something on every single issue of Mutant X, from the cover of the first issue down to the last page of the final, and I think the third annual is the last issue. I had a good time doing that. I've been doing comics now. This year makes my 30th anniversary in comics.
Wow.
And so I'm feeling very old at the moment. And I've worked certainly on Mutant X, many other things at Marvel. I'm probably best known for an 18-year run on The Simpsons, a 10-year run on Fables, and besides being an inker on those things, I also currently drawing covers for Doctor Who and Red Sonja, and check out what I'm doing at pepoy.com.
Nice.
I'll be especially do that next year because I'm going to be launching a Kickstarter for my own project.
Nice.
You did the interiors for Dinosaurs, right?
Yeah. Last year I penciled and inked the interiors for the sort of revamp of the 80s cartoon Dinosaurs, which I did with Michael Hughes on.
So go get that.
I have copies at my table for you. Happy not to have to take them home.
All right, so let's jump into it next. So Howard, so where did you come up with the concept? I mean, prior to that, you had written 40 so issues of X Factor, which you kind of made into a Havoc-centric book.
Yes.
And did X Factor ending, do you know if that was sales related, or what caused the end of X Factor, beginning of Mutant X?
The general answer is it's always sales related. Everything is sales related, still and very specifically at that time. And interestingly, I thought about this a lot last night. The experience of trying to cram for an exam for this panel, talking about a book that I wrote quite some time ago, and I tend not to reread my own work once it's been published, because I've written it, and then in varying stages of proofreading, I read it over and over again. And if I reread it after it's been printed, all I'm going to see is the mistakes, or worse, the changes the editor made, which will drive me up the wall. So I choose not to do it.
Thus all of his editors are still blind.
Yes, they are, and many of them are friends. And because I haven't read what they've changed. But as I was cramming the other night, I was in the hotel, I'm reading the book in bed, and my wife thought it was hysterical that I was reading a comic book, at midnight on Thursday. I turned to her at one point and I said, this writer isn't half bad. So it was a very bizarre experience, because if you know the concept of the book, it is one person, the character of Havoc, there are two in their consciousnesses, get transferred or swapped. And I kind of felt that experience as I was reading it. Really? Did I actually write this? Because that's not a bad balloon there. But to answer your specific question, is I have a very distinct memory of how the concept of the book was formed, and then just recently, within the past year, I read somebody else's recollection of how it started, and it was the editor of the book, who I honestly didn't remember I worked with. That was a long time ago, and well, yes, yeah, I had no memory of this. So I will tell you my memory, and then I will tell you his what he says happened. My memory was I was writing a story or pitching the story with the ending of the series of X Factor being with Havoc dying, and everybody went, because at that time we didn't kill characters willy-nilly and then just bring them back years later. And I said, I did that. They reacted. I said, oh, but it gets better. and that's when I pitched the concept for Mutant X. That's how I remember it. The Frank Pepoy, who was the editor, and I assume he was a good editor, even though I don't remember. And
hired us.
Yes, well, again, I don't know if he hired us, or my recollection is it was assigned, but which is how it often happened. His recollection was he and the assistant editor came up with the concept for Mutant X and presented it finished to me. I actually called a few other editors that I was working with at the time and colleagues, and like, do you remember? Because I don't think I've ever done that in my career, where somebody has just handed me a concept. Because it is not a way for me as a writer to get passionate about a project. So I don't know, and I'm not saying that Frank's wrong. I'm just saying I have a different. I probably. I'm remembering the origin in a different frame of reality, and then our universes got crossed. So my recollection was we were deciding to cancel X Factor. I came up with the concept of killing off Havoc and then Mutant X and have a blast.
So in that concept of who did what, where did the name come from? Like, why was the name of the book not The Six, or why was it not just Havoc, or what gave you the idea of Or indeed, maybe it was Frank. Because
Well, very well could be Frank. We should ask him. Anybody have him on speed dial? my recollection was.
Message him on Facebook.
There you go. My recollection was, again, with many, because I was thinking about that as I was looking through the names of characters, some of the choices I made, and they all came from looking at past continuity. And in terms of Mutant X, it was, and this will play into one of your later questions, I believe, and something you just discussed a few moments ago. But was, at that point, it was some of the heat of the X books. And so whatever we did, we wanted to make sure we had that big X on there, which is why, I was explaining this to somebody at the table even about why West Coast Avengers became Avengers West Coast, or why Solo Avengers became Avengers Spotlight. It's all about grouping of books and racking. And so with Avengers, you wanted everything, and because that was going to be, in a comic book store, it was all going to be kind of over there at the top, and you wanted them all together. And with the X books, they were just all going to be here. There was no corner there. So my recollection was it was a natural. There were mutants with the X factor,
Okay.
and we wanted to get rid of the factor part. So there you go.
So let's move. So in the character designs, and did you play any role in character design? Did you talk to Tom? Do you remember at all, or
I mean, the characters were already designed when I came on.
So when you came on,
yeah,
everything was designed?
Yeah, because the way I ended up on the book is I've already been working I'd worked with Frank at DC Comics on Steel in the early 90s.
Can you talk into the microphone?
Is this microphone working?
Yes.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. Yeah, so I'd worked with Frank at DC Comics in the early 90s on Steel and some other things. And so, yeah, when he went over to Marvel, he started hiring me for things. And I had been doing a series called Maverick, penciled by Jimmy Chung. And that had just been canceled. So he was looking for something else for me to do. And Mutant X came along, and he had actually, the characters had been designed. Because my tryout for Mutant X was inking some of Tom Rainey's character designs that he'd already done, like these single figure shots of several different characters, and that's what got me to the book. So yes, pretty much everyone was already designed by the time I got there.
Cool, awesome. So were you involved in what? Like, for example, and so if you haven't seen the book, the concept, there's two really big character changes, and one of the concepts of Mutant X, one of the things that brought me to it was that it was the original X-Men for the most part. It was the original X-Men, except instead of Cyclops, it was Havoc, and with one addition, which we'll get to later. But there's massive differences between Beast and Angel and how they look at this time, and it kind of takes off. But like the concept of Fallen and Brute, were you involved in what you wanted them to look like? Was that all Tom?
Well, no. Well, as a writer, you always give general direction. I mean, the final character design is really worked out between the artist, the editor, and the writer. But part of my job as a writer is to come up with a concept. And for these characters in particular, as I was looking through them, I realized all of it was all tied to story for me in this book. And I think ultimately, ultimately this was a precursor to the Ultimate Universe, the Ultimates universe. And I got to just backtrack a little bit. Part of the thing that was so freeing about this was nobody thought it would work. And that has been my experience. The projects I've had the most fun with and have been the most successful are those in which people think, oh yeah, we'll give it a try. And we'll cancel it after a few issues. And so I got to just jump into this outside of Marvel continuity and revisit my favorite stories. And that's really what Brian did with The Ultimate. books. Just go back through continuity and find certain points in my favorite stories that I could then jump off. Okay, this is how it went. Here's point A. Well, what if we went to point C? Instead of, and I was able to just choose all kinds of points of continuity, and they all seem very natural, even as I was reading the stories, and I think admiring the brilliance of the writer.
The concept of that you have, there's a true thing that we all went through where Storm was enthralled by Dracula,
right,
and she defeated it, and
yep,
in Mutant X, she didn't.
Yeah, and that was for me, aside from having, that was really the starting point for me, because I remembered that story and thought, well, yeah, what if Storm actually, was turned into a vampire by, and one of the more brilliant names ever. Went from Storm to Bloodstorm. I'm sorry. You go for the obvious.
So since we're on Aurora, let's jump ahead a little bit in my thing here. So from the Mutant X universe, the only thing that has come forward is in the X-Men Blue series that they recently did. Bloodstorm was part of the original X-Men, the Young X-Men. Mm-hmm. And how does that? Because that's something that you brought into this world.
Yes, that's great. I've never read it.
I know.
Because I don't.
I only read it. I'm going to be honest. So the only issue of X-Men Blue I read was the one that Cullen Bunn wrote and fixed Havoc.
I just don't. Here, my policy as a writer, and I've explained this a number of times over the past few weeks, because. And if we do touch on Ghost Rider, there's a new Ghost Rider book out right now, which I read and I love. The thing that's unusual about that is that as a writer, I had made a very conscious decision that when I was done with a character, I no longer would read any stories with that character, which was kind of sad because I was a big Ghost Rider fan, which is why I wanted to write Ghost Rider. I was a big Spider-Man fan. But I have not in many years read stories involving those characters, because I do a lot of interviews, and I do panels, I do podcasts, and I don't ever want to even inadvertently say something that could be perceived as criticism of another writer's work. Sometimes I talk a lot, and I'm made to have a slip of the tongue. And and that's, everybody comes to a book with a different perspective. So I am aware of them bringing Bloodstorm in, which I think is cool. Never looked at it.
No, I understand.
Yeah, because I don't know.
That's fine.
But then again, as we established, I didn't remember what I did. So,
so Andrew,
yeah,
the concept of you staying on as the inker, because Tom did the first 3, and then.
Carrie Nord.
Carrie Nord came on. Tom came back. Bart was on it for a while.
Carrie came back on as regular.
Carrie was a regular.
Tom left for good. Carrie came on for a while, and
And then Bart did 2 issues.
No, Bart didn't. I think Bart did less than 1 issue.
According to what I've seen, I haven't read those together. But anyway, then and Tom Lyle did a bunch.
Tom Lyle did some. Javier Solteras did some. Ron Lynn did a handful.
At the end,
so what?
Ron Lynn finished it.
Yeah, I think Ron was the final penciler of the series. He did probably about 6-7 issues. We had,
Did you ink Colleen's pencils?
Yeah. We had the 3 annuals by Pascal Ferry, Colleen Duran, James Fry. I inked all those. I think it's like we certainly went through musical pencilers on this book.
But
Oh no, but I was going to say but I think you were saying, was there a reason why I was staying on the inker? The reason I was staying on the inker is I was actually getting it done every month. It's like, and I at least brought some level of, maybe some artistic continuity to it.
Right. So
yeah, I was going to say I can speak as a former editor. Number one, I think sometimes the artists, the pencilers, the pencilers and the writers get a little less so, but the pencilers definitely get the glory. I always relied heavily on good, reliable. And good is first, quite frankly. You need and you desire an inker who is going to enhance what is there. And there are misconceptions of how important, in my opinion, of how important inkers are to a book. And quite frankly, and that follows through, and then also letterers, and I just realized Chris Leopoulos lettered the entire series as well, and and colorists as well. I mean, and I don't think the readers sometimes realize the importance of all of it, because if it's going to work, it has to be organic from beginning to end. And to me, the inker is the cement that pulls the entire artistic element of it together. I mean, I'm not saying that because I'm sitting next to an inker. It is, as an editor, that's me speaking not only as a writer, but as an editor. If you don't have a good inker, and there are times that I've worked with inkers that were not so good, but the reliability is key. But I think that's how I got as much writing work as I did, because I was dependable, but the quality has got to be there.
Right. As Jason once said, Jason Lee, who was one of the other editors we worked with on this, as he once said to me, it's like, he didn't worry about me. It's like, because this before Scanner started, it was FedEx. He's like, every week I would send you 6 pages, and every week I would get 6 pages back from you from the previous week. So he's like, I never had to think about you or worry about you, because I just knew whoever the penciler was, you were going to get it done.
Right. But also bring a consistency
to it. And still make it look good.
Yeah.
And that's always my attempt, especially when we had, however many we had, 12, 13, 14 different pencilers over the course.
And they are not all cut from the same cloth. Those pencilers.
Oh no, very different, very different techniques and styles. I mean, I actually helped pick several of the replacements, because Jason would say, well, hey, we've lost another penciler, and so that's how Tom Lyle ended up in the book, Javier Solteras, Ron Lim, and James Fry ended up on that annual, because basically they needed pencilers, and I just kept suggesting people I knew who I thought could get the job done, and I liked working with. I mean, Ron and I have been friends and wanting to work together, and we never had, so that was a nice chance. James Fry was always one of my favorite people I've ever inked. His pencils were always fantastic.
And a really nice guy.
Yeah, he was super nice guy. And so that's so. And Javier Solteras, at that time, I had already worked with him on so many projects. We'd already done several, hundreds of pages together. So so it was an easy pick on that one. But you asked about this. You asked about the characters. I had nothing to do with the characters, but I at least did have something to do with some of the pencilers that came on. Because Jason would ask for my suggestions.
That's excellent.
But I think I interrupted your question earlier. You were supposed to ask. You were going to ask me.
No, I think I got it.
You got it. Okay, sorry.
You answered the question before I asked it.
Good. Okay,
Awesome.
good.
That is excellent. That is the question.
Okay.
So let's talk just a little bit more about character design and choices. Either you can make it up or you can try.
I'll lie. That's what I get paid to do.
So, you've already said the concept of the divergent storm. So why she's the only one who's not the original, who's not an original X-Men, that's part of the 6.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It was again.
Another woman, was that part of it?
Oh well, yes. You definitely want. I'm assuming you want to have some balance there.
The other woman is the villain.
Yes, ultimately yes. But it's. I mean, I also really liked Storm. I thought she was a really cool character. I had a couple of opportunities in my career to work with that character, and there is an appeal there to me, which I don't think has fully been exploited in the movie. I love that shirt.
Thank you.
It says, "Never judge a comic by its movie." So yes, I think part of it was to have some balance. She's just a powerful, cool, badass character, and I wanted the opportunity to explore that.
Okay. So, Elektra as Nanny.
I know. I just remembered last night I read that.
So if you
I thought,
haven't read it,
wow, that's cool.
in this world that Alex Summers finds himself, he's married to Madeline Pryor, and they have a child named Scott, and their child's nanny is Electra Nachios, the assassin. What?
Well, okay, I guess at this point we're establishing a pattern. I am drawn to badass women characters, in not only in comic books but on the screen. I think Marvel is missing a huge opportunity. I'm hoping some of the rumors I've heard about them just taking a bunch of the female characters in the movies and putting them together for a movie. I love. I don't know. Has everybody here seen Endgame?
Yes.
I assume. I love the scene towards the final battle where we get all of the women. I mean,
that
cool.
was the critical.
Yes, but I thought even before that, I really after I saw Black Panther, I really wanted them to do a spin-off called WoW, Warrior Women of Wakanda. I really thought that that would have been the coolest thing ever. So I am drawn to those characters, and again, in terms of story, I wanted to play against type. It actually even surprised me. I really didn't remember. So early on, Scotty is off with Natty. Scotty, I was like, Natty, I can't remember. Is that the robot thing or whatever? And then when she makes her appearance, I go, oh yeah, man, I'm good. So that is I like strong female. Big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer. And what Joss Whedon did there, and so yeah, that would be why.
So we can do this in two characters in one question, and this is kind of you took very very known, revered, strongly positive characters, and changed them in significant ways to definitely deprecate them in terms of their occasions. So we're talking about number one, Nick Fury, you made into basically a terrorist hunting mutants, and Reed Richards in this version of the universe is definitely not the smartest man in the world and kind of a goof.
Yeah.
And so, do you hate Reed Richards?
No, I hate myself. Okay, let's just turn this into a therapy session. But no, truthfully,
Seriously, to be honest with you, what you did is you made Sue Storm the leader of the Fantastic Four, absolutely.
Well, okay, do we see a pattern here? Yeah. And people would, there in the past, people would ask me, do you want to write some Fantastic Four stuff with Reed and all that? And look, I'm not stupid. I like to think of myself as a relatively bright person. I'm not Reed Richards' level of, so, and that carries through to another character in Mutant X. I need to write them down to a level that I understand, making mistakes, or and so that was probably part. If I was going to be using the Fantastic Four and I was going to be using Reed Richards, I can't pretend that I'm the smartest man on the planet, because guess what, guys? I'm not. So that would have been part of it, but it's also about finding the characters and finding where their through line has gone in most stories, and then trying to find a way to kind of really bump up against that. So yeah, Nick Fury, I love the character of Nick Fury, but I started thinking of him more as Oliver North, and as a result, well, okay, where would that take him? So you start going down a timeline and saying, if things didn't go exactly as planned for any of these characters, where would that take them? And with Fury, it seemed like a natural to me. He doesn't think of himself as a terrorist, certainly. He thinks of himself as a freedom fighter, against the mutant threat. And I thought that made a more powerful story than bringing in strictly Trask and the Sentinels, which ultimately get involved in things anyway. But
so, Andrew, I know we've talked about what you do, but did you get any sort of reaction that you remember when it happened, when Mutant was happening. Granted, it wasn't internet, but it wasn't what it is today, so there wasn't any immediate feedback. But do you remember any sort of something that brought it from? Because it was originally supposed to be 12 issues, correct?
Yeah.
And then it expanded beyond that. Do you remember any response to it as the book declined?
I just remember people being really into it, and it was nice because I'd certainly worked on a lot of stuff, over the years, and I'd worked on things that, I'd worked on issues of, actual issues of X-Men and things like that. But this was my first time doing a full-on series that actually got a good amount of attention, and fans seemed to be really into it. So I certainly enjoyed that. It was fun, and it's like, and I actually, Howard and I have talked about this. I haven't, I often don't read the books that I ink because at the end of the day, I don't want to. I've already spent 12 hours at the drawing board. I don't tend to read books that look like what look anything like what I worked on, much less what I worked on. But I know that certainly what I did read of it and what I knew of it, since I'd read some of the, some of the, like I think they sent me the plot for
Okay.
and stuff. I enjoyed the concept, and so it's like so it's like it was nice to also be working on a book that I enjoyed and everybody else seems to be really enjoying. And that was sort of through the whole course of it. That this had I really liked the fact that this had a really diehard fan following. And people were really, throughout the whole 3 years we were doing it, really into this. And I remember at the time, it was, during the horrible decline of comic sales in the 90s, everything was dropping every month. We were actually going up every month.
Yeah.
Little by little, our sales were, so we may not have had X-Men sales, but but X-Men was dropping every month, and we were actually going up. And so I just really always appreciate the fact that everyone liked it so much, and even to this day, come up to me 20 years later with a stack of Mutant X and tell me how much they love it. In the bar last night, I was talking with Tom King, the Batman writer these days, and I said to him, it's like, yeah, Howard and I are doing this panel on Mutant X tomorrow, and this is 20 years ago, we don't really remember this. And he's like, oh, I love that series. I read the entire thing. I can tell you all about it. He's like, I'm going to come to your panel and I can talk about it.
Tom, you're not here, are you? I've never met
him. Tom was very excited about the fact that we were talking about Mutant X. He apparently thought it was just the greatest thing.
I got to go to the bar.
That was something I always appreciated about it back then, and still appreciate to this day, that people who read it just loved it, and it's nice to have been a part of it.
Yeah, that has been a surprise to me, quite frankly, because I stopped doing shows a number of years ago, and slowly got back into it a few years ago, and then when people started showing up with stacks of Mutant X, oh really? And I'm used to people coming with Spider-Man and Ghost Rider, but as you said, they're very hardcore fan base for this. As a matter of fact, I have an adult daughter who has a job in New York City, and a colleague, and she introduced me to the comic, and I was interested in comics a little, and I met him a few times, and he never said anything, and it turned out huge Mutant X. It's like the only thing that I've written that he likes. Which may be why he didn't tell me directly.
So, again, kind of playing into the fact that it was some time ago, were there reactions at that time? For example, in issue 4 or 5, Man Spider, this world's version of Spider-Man, is killed completely. And there's no, was there a reaction to that? Was there editorial questions on it, number one? And do you remember any sort of reaction?
Well, again, because of the lack of immediate feedback in terms of the internet, we used to rely on fan mail.
Sure.
In which you really, I miss mail, where people had to stop, decide to take out a piece of paper, write down how much they hated you, then hold it up, look for the address, find a stamp, walk into the mailbox. those were the nice days, and then you get oh look, I really suck. I miss that. Now people can anonymously.
But you suck so many times every day.
Yes, so fast, without thinking, and yet I happen to like them if I happen to appear, in some thread where they go radio silent. Then and anybody can feel free to come to my table and tell me that I suck. I appreciate that. The right to free expression. Nobody has ever done that to me at a convention. So I actually would be kind of freeing if somebody did. Even if I don't believe it, it would actually be fun if my wife was there because she would be shocked. But no, I don't remember there being a specific. I mean, certainly not editorial because again, I did pretty much have free reign because nobody, we were not in normal, continuity. It was a mutant book, so killing off Man-Spider was less of an impact on that kind of. We thought it would give some dramatic impact, but there was no plan on expanding this particular universe. Now
the irony of the killing of Man-Spider is it happens, I think, in issue 4 or 5, and then in the following issue, Man-Spider shows back up because the other one was a clone. There's nothing to do with that.
No, that was Frank Pittarese, the editor. That had everything to do with that.
We'll be Kelly this time.
Oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, clones. What a stupid idea that is.
So, and I don't know if you. I mean, obviously you weren't reading the scripts, Andrew, but and if you haven't read this book, I certainly do recommend it because there's something in it that's very stylistically, I think, interesting and challenging. And I mentioned this. You've seen the question that I gave you this ahead of time, but especially the first few issues, there's a lot. They open cold in the middle of something, and it definitely adds something to the theme of the book. Especially if you read it. If you read it in a collection, you kind of go back. But Alex is completely confused almost the entire time. He's still always trying to figure out where he is, and you open cold, and it kind of gives the reader like the concept of trying to figure out things along with Alex. Mm-hmm. Was that intentional?
Oh yeah, yes, and I honestly, I did remember that, and I remembered my favorite line from the opening, which somebody had or towards the end of the opening that came to my table yesterday and just recited to me, which is "I remember dying."
Yes.
And
it's also the last one.
Yes.
Well.
Yes. And but it was to throw the readers into the midst of the experience that Alex was going to have throughout the book. I mean, he settled in a little bit, and when he had a co-conspirator eventually. That was what it was about, and that's why it was fun. Again, talking to me, going back and trying to cram for the exam today, reading it because I was feeling the same thing. Oh, where was I? What did I write? It was that same experience, and it does. I think it does. Quite frankly, I really never speak highly of my writing, but I think it did create that. That experience for the reader, and it was intentional. So, yeah.
One of the things I wanted to bring out, like you've now gone back and looked at it. Chris Eliopoulos' lettering is fantastic. Some of the techniques he did in there were, for that time, were pretty current, pretty edgy, especially with the
and all hand lettered.
Yes.
No.
We were already
digital from the beginning.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
So that's why you wouldn't know the story at all.
Right.
Then.
Right.
Because
this was also one of my first experiences working with digital lettering. Because we were already all digital.
No memory of that.
So for process, you would get the pencil pages, the actual pencil pages, and then you didn't scan them, you sent them back.
Right. This is long before we all had scanners in our homes and things like that. So they would FedEx them to me, and I'd ink them, and I'd FedEx them back. And I mean, one thing I certainly remember with the first issue is that it was running so late that I had to use what what no longer exists, same day FedEx, where they would show up at my house at like 6 or 7 in the morning and pick up a box, and it would be in New York by 3 o'clock that
But you're
afternoon.
in Chicago, right?
Well, at the time when I started this, I was living in North Carolina,
Oh.
and the reason I didn't end up making a lot of the second issue is because that's right when I was moving back to Chicago. So you know, but yeah, I would get the pages, and it's like as long as the pencil, like on a lot of books, as long as the pencils were good and they were clear, I would just do my best inking them, and I just sort of guess what was going on in the story. Like I said, I think they did send me the plot for number 1, so I did have some idea what was going on.
So we're doing digital lettering?
The coloring is digital as well. Sure.
No.
No.
The coloring was not digital at first. I actually, because Gina Going was actually doing color guides on paper, and I know that for a fact because they accidentally returned a stack of it to me one time when they were doing art returns.
Really?
So yeah.
Wow.
And so yeah, the coloring did not run digital like a lot of it, but yeah, lettering. 1998, a lot of lettering was digital.
That's some amazing hand colored letter. I mean,
Digital lettering.
no, I'm sorry, colors.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see as it went on, they did not too long into the series probably switch to some digital effects here and there. But I think a lot of that even was just done in house based on Gina's color guides. She was going in with her Doc Martens guys on Xerox and some.
Yeah, I missed that coloring.
But yeah, no. So that's why, like, when it's like I know more of what happened in the Scooby-Doo comics I did because those were lettered on the boards than I did on Mutant because those were not lettered on the boards.
Wow.
I prefer lettered on the boards.
Well, yeah, because there's less ink to put down. I mean, as an editor,
Right.
it was considered back in the day when everything was lettered on the boards. It was considered a failure from an editorial perspective if you had to have things pasted up, which is the other way you do it. Lettered on overlay, and then eventually they had to be merged, and everything had to be pasted down onto the boards. But the inker, I mean, if you look, no, but it took time. That's part of it.
They usually we got a slight bonus, usually not enough to really compensate, but we got a slight bonus for inking on unlettered pages at the time. They eventually decided to stop.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah. But yeah, so what would always drive me crazy is I remember like one of the Javier Soltera's jobs. Javier had done some big city thing, and I was doing all these little buildings, all this work, and then Kurt Busiek ended up writing like 6 big captions, and can't even see the building.
That's what I was just going to say. Look how wordy this writer was. Whack! Right down. I mean, that would have been less than you would have had to have. And not, but it was, I'm talking about time, yeah.
So yeah.
It
was digital from the first.
Yeah. See, I left staff before we had computers. That's how old I am. I had a conversation with I'm talking to Marvel about doing a project for them this year, and I had a conversation with the editor, who's my daughter's age, and we were just getting to know each other, and I mentioned to him that when I left staff at Marvel as an editor, nobody had a computer, and there was dead silence on the other end for a very pregnant pause, which he said, well, how did you even do comics? I said, well, on your computer you have that little cut and paste function. I said that involved an X-Acto knife and some glue, which is how we did it, and we were putting out more comics.
Right, and we literally were doing that. I would sit there with sometimes when I would have to fix things on these pages, I would be maybe running to the copy shop up the street, making some Xeroxes, taking my X-Acto knife and a Yoo-hoo glue stick, and I'm just like rearranging some stuff on the pages. There was no Photoshop.
Nope.
So I mentioned Kelly did that one of the angles, and she was very much hoping to get more work on the series. She really enjoyed it. And,
I did not know that.
And
did I write it?
Yes.
Yeah. Wow, that's cool.
But she was very disappointed when it ended, and so and it did. As you said everything is sales related.
Yes.
But did you feel like you said what you wanted?
I don't know. I don't think this was, the cancellation of the series was not strictly
It was
sales.
not, no, it was not sales.
It was bringing full circle to our friend Howard Chaykin.
Yeah.
And it wasn't Howard's
It wasn't, no, we
fault.
can't, don't blame Howard
No.
for this.
Well, no, don't blame.
You can blame them for anything.
Yo, I do. Trust me.
He loves guilt.
Yes. I just to digress a little bit. I did a panel with Howard in Toronto 2 years ago, where we reconnected after not having seen each other for about 30 years. Back then, I thought he was a complete jerk. It turns out I like him quite a bit. But we were on a panel about writing comics, and it was Howard, myself, and a writer whose name I can't remember. He was a last-minute substitution. He was more of an indie writer. And the moderator did an introduction of us and got to talk about it. He asked one question to Howard, and I pretty much never got a word in edgewise. And I'm sorry, I don't know if you get a sense of me right now. I've never been the quietest person in any room. I assume it will be my wink in which I left the panel and I said that to Howard. I said, you know, it was a pretty packed audience. Maybe one or two people in that audience would have liked to have heard from the guy that wrote, 10 years of Spider-Man comics. And he said, oh, suck it up, Mackie. And so, yes, but I believe, at my recollection, and you seem to remember the same one, one of the heads of Marvel at the time, he was the head of Marvel Studios, was Avi Arad. And he had come up with this great concept for a TV series.
Yeah, but there are other names.
Right. And he really liked the name.
Yeah.
And I guess we could have changed the name of this book.
I remember going last. That's how I remember. It's like they wanted the name for the TV series. So they, despite the fact that, like I said, we may not have had like super spectacular stuff, but we were actually going up every month in an era when everything else was declining.
Yeah.
And they canceled the book to give the name to the TV series. And I remember, Jason fought really hard, for us to try to just say, well, fine, take the name, but let's relaunch it with a new number one under a different title because people actually care about this book.
Right. Yeah.
And unfortunately, the powers that be didn't at the time.
But yeah, as evidence, the 14-year run of Mutant X, the TV series. But yeah, that's my recollection as well as to why.
Well, the reason the series failed is because it was nothing like the book, which was much better.
But did the TV series have
Thank you.
anything? Did the TV series
Nothing.
have anything to do?
It was nothing like it.
Yeah,
There
I
were
never
no-
watched it.
there were no
I was
characters.
annoyed at the time because I really liked working on this book. And Jason was a great editor to work with, and I was, and so I never watched the TV series.
All right, so we have about 10 minutes. We want to open it to any questions anybody may have in the audience. Anybody? Yes?
I have two questions.
Okay.
The first one
everybody
is,
only gets one.
Well,
the first one is, do each of you have a favorite character to write for or to ink on? Like, was there one in particular that really inspired you?
In this book.
In this book,
In
yeah.
this book. You go first.
For me, much of it was based on the I enjoyed it because of the pencils. But I will say certainly, Bloodstorm.
Yeah.
Rainey and certainly Carrie Nord seemed to put a little extra effort in on her, and so that was always fun to do.
I would only just because I want to copy Andrew, but no, Bloodstorm. Well, obviously, I have an affection for Havoc. He really was the focal point of the book. But it's also one of the few times that I have somewhat successfully written a group book. I don't like group books. I don't like writing group books because they're a group. And you have to juggle storylines and you keep track of characters. It's way easier writing a Flaming Skull, riding Demon on a motorcycle, and just focus right there. And now there's a bad guy. There were a lot of moving parts to this, but so it's an interesting question because yes, the way to handle the group book, at least as far as I'm concerned, is to focus on individuals. And I did like Havoc. I mean, Bloodstorm jumps out, but I did kind of like Brute, who was my version of Beast. And again, kind of cruel what I did with him. You know, again, another smart guy that I decided to bring down to my level.
So now, I would think, if I were to look at this, I would think that Brute would be your least favorite character, especially if you saw him on a page where you had to do little scales and all that.
I mean, sure. You know, I mean, to be honest, I don't particularly, you know, it's like I don't think I disliked him, but I don't have any fond memories of Brute. Of someone having to commission and
Really?
show me something, yeah. I mean, I do get the occasional Bloodstorm request, but yeah, somebody had me do Brute, and I'm like, you know, it's like, as the inker, it's like I don't have to worry about so much about the engineering of making the figure work, and I'm like, once I have to look at it, I'm going, boy, these legs are a pain to draw.
Yeah.
You know, so yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that's like anybody who's ever had to any artist who ever has to get onto Spider-Man or Captain America or you know
or the pain of drawing Jack of Hearts every day.
there you go. You know, that's easier for the writer.
Your second question.
The second question is, you suggested that people might want to read this book. Do either of you have copies of it here or of the series?
I do not. I think I have individual issues. I don't,
Yeah,
and I have my own personal copy of the. Yeah, I guess they're coming out with the second.
The second volume is coming out soon. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I unfortunately do not have any with me. I actually pulled mine out of. I actually had pulled them out of storage, and then the box fell out of my car as I was packing up my boxes to ship. And what had been right on top was Mutant X, and that's the stuff that ended up getting squished and actually torn on the sidewalk when it fell out of my car. So I do not have my two copies that I still have in the trade with me. So
And this,
I left them on the sidewalk so somebody could hopefully come along and pick them and discover a wonderful comic book series.
There you go.
And prop them up against a tree on a busy street. So,
this first volume collection is on Comixology as a collection, so it's there.
yeah, the book, and it's still in print.
Yes.
And if you get it on Comixology and you bring your computer or iPad to me, I am more than happy to sign it.
Right on the screen.
Right on the screen.
Are there any other questions?
Nothing.
I got one. Kind of curiosity. I've collected for a long time. Do you kind of think now with the cinematic world, it kind of like limits people to like get only certain type of comics? Unlike olden days when I was collecting comics, you would get it and have to see little bubbles. You issue this, and you go in and you start finding more great stories going along because you're seeing the back area. Do you think more people are kind of like just newer comic people are just sticking to cinematic worlds and cinematic comics, or are they trying to venture out more like we did?
I think that's an interesting question and one that I ponder. I think the more people know the characters, the Marvel characters in particular, based upon the movies now than comic books. There's a wider audience. There are people that are going to see those movies from Iron Man through to Endgame that have never picked up a comic. I mean, I can tell you, my wife has seen all of the movies. I've written shy of 1,000 comics, and she's read one. It was Gambit #1.
Really?
Yes, because I made her read it. I walked her and said, ooh, Deb, I kind of be proud of this book, and would you read it, please? And she read it, and I came back about a half an hour later, and she said, oh yeah, that was good. And then and I realized it was the first of a 4-part series, and she never asked for the other 3.
The reason she's laughing so hard and turning so red right now is she's my girlfriend, and she's read one comic book.
Yeah, there you go.
So The Adventures of Simone and Ajax, my creator-owned comic book.
Very good.
Yeah. But yeah, she has read one comic book, and earlier today I tried to give her another comic book, and she's had she's good on comics.
Well, just so you know, I met my wife on staff at Marvel. Okay, I walked into my office my first day at Marvel, and there was an attractive young lady sitting on the couch, and I went, all right, this is going to be a great place to work. And we've been together for 35 years. I've written, hundreds and hundreds of comics. One, she's read one. And she had a box of comics that she collected from working on staff, because we used to get free comics, and she only saved the ones she liked, and it was everything done by Frank Miller and Bill Sienkiewicz. I thought, okay, at least she has good taste.
All right.
Wait.
Okay.
I might have missed this because I came in late and traffic was really horrendous.
It's okay.
But I really like the incorporation of Electra. When I read this when I was a little girl, I was like, Electra as a nanny? That's so wild. But I really liked it. So I guess like, what was your inspiration or like thought process behind that? If you haven't guessed.
So we are gonna. This is being recorded, and it will be on Pop Culture Squad at some point, so you can see what he said originally. But he's going to tell you again.
Yes, because thank you, and thank you for showing up, and thank you for
I
commenting.
dashed in here. I was like, I'm gonna catch the last episode.
And it was, quite frankly, I had said I was cramming for the exam today by rereading, which I haven't done that in many years, and I liked what the writer did, because there was foreshadowing of the nanny, and then suddenly Electra makes a dramatic appearance, and I went, oh, cool. And I happen to be drawn to, and I said this earlier, I'm drawn to powerful female characters. Big fan of Buffy the Vampire Slayer, and that was part of it. It was part of it was my attraction to strong female characters, but also to try to throw the readers a little bit, because it's the least likely person you would think you would hire as a nanny for your young child. But if you're in this group who potentially are under threat at all times, that's the person I would have wanted watching over my children. As a matter of fact, I still do. And they're full-grown adults.
All right. So where are people going to find you?
Where are they going to? I'm down at. You think I should know? I'm next to Greg Land and right behind John Beatty and Zach. I think it's 212.
No,
It's
you're
202.
No, yeah.
202.
He's the first person in row 200.
Yes, if you're looking for a restroom, I'm very close to them, and I am on Facebook only. I don't do Twitter because it's Twitter. Howard Mackie Writer. If you're interested, send me a friend request. I have a new Marvel project that will be coming out within the next year, and I have a number of creator-owned projects in the works as well, which I will be announcing. I only talk about comic books and writing on my Facebook page. There's no pictures of my food or my pets or me juggling my pets while they eat food, and definitely no politics. So it's strictly comic books, and feel free to send me a friend request and ask me questions. You post a question and I will answer it about comics, about things I've written, about things I've read, about things I've written and not read.
So I'm just further down the row from him at table 321. So basically the opposite end of the row from him towards the back. And you can come by my table. I may not have any Mutant X, but I've got plenty of other comics there at the table. Happy to sign them. As far as other upcoming work, like I said, just announced that I'm going to be doing covers for the new Doctor Who series that launches. I've been penciling and inking covers for Doctor Who starting in January. And I'm also drawing covers for Red Sonja for Dynamite. Like I think I mentioned earlier, I'm going to be doing a Kickstarter next year for Simone and Ajax, bringing them back for a third series. If you want to stop by my table, you can sign up your email address so I can notify you when that's happening.
I'm just curious, is she going to be reading that?
No promises.
Yeah. I've only ever written 2 series, and she's read one of them, but she hasn't read the other one. So we can't.
I didn't have a copy until like a week ago.
So as far as like I actually do have a fair amount of social media stuff, though. It's like I don't post all that much. I am on Twitter. You can follow me there. I'm on Instagram, and I am on Facebook. I have a personal page and a fan page. And if you do want to follow me, follow the fan page, because I'll just say it in advance. Generally, I accept mostly only people I know and have met on my personal page. So look for me on my fan page. You can tell the difference because my fan page has like a little cartoony headshot of me as its icon. So.
And this will be posted on popculturesquad.com. We have a little presence at booth 118. There's some stickers and some. Do we have pins?
We have pins.
There's pins and stickers there, so come get it and check us out. We have Facebook and Twitter and Instagram pages, so you can follow us, like us there. Popculturesquad.com. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here. Thank you guys for being here. Hey, thanks for spending some time with us. That was a great conversation. Thanks to Howard and Andrew for joining us. Be sure to follow them on Facebook and Instagram. Also, be sure to like, follow, and subscribe to Pop Culture Squad on all our social media platforms and the website itself. See you soon.